Hi everyone, this is African Queen Mo Cardiff coming to you from the beautiful city of Nairobi. Not yet in Cardiff, still in Nairobi. But I tell you what, the weather in Nairobi is good. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. I hope you can all hear me this evening. Apologies for not finding my way on Wednesday. I've had a long week. This has been a tough week. I tried my best to schedule on Wednesday and it just failed. I failed. Do you remember hearing? I used to hate that word failure. I hated failing. I always was like, wanting to always be passing everything. I never wanted to see a fail anywhere. Yeah. But anyway, guys, we are here on Friday, so we made it. Thank you very much for sticking with us. Today, we have a very interesting show. It's about sibling rivalry. I want to understand what the heck is wrong, you know? Most of my friends who I talk to, for example, guys, today's relationships day. It's Friday. That's when we talk about relationships. Yeah. And last week we talked about friendships. Last week, Friday. This Friday, we're going to talk about sibling rivalry. Siblings are like brothers and sisters, right? Rivalry just means basically, because there's some people, by the way, who watch me and they have told me, hiyo kizungu yako, unasikia tu alafu inaeleweka. Ukienda tu nayo inaeleweka. Which means in Kiswahili, this is actually a gardener who told me about the English on my show. I asked him, "Are you watching my show?" And he said, "Yeah, I watch it. But you see," he was telling me in Swahili that my English is very difficult, but the more he listens, the more he understands. Yeah, so sometimes I have to try to break things down. So this is for you, Just Fat. Okay, this is for you, so that it doesn't inaeleweka, ndio eleweke kabisa, sindio? All right, guys. So anyway, coming to you from the beautiful city of Nairobi, like I said. So we were just talking about, most of the friends that I talk to. Okay, sorry, my mind is everywhere. One of the things that they always complain about is the fact that either they're not getting along with one of their sisters or their cousins or their, brothers and sisters mostly. And you always wonder to yourself, why? What's the problem? And when you hear what the person did, you're like, what? Really? Is this a person that we knew growing up? This is what they did to you? And especially when it comes to after your parents pass or one of your parents passes and now you're dealing with property. Oh my goodness, we have heard it. Even in this country, in the country of Kenya, there are many families, very many families that have unfortunately made it to the news with their sibling rivalry and where it took them. So today, that's what we're discussing. In the studio with me is Susan Mathai. And Susan, welcome to the show. Susan is our lawyer and she's also a mediator. So if you guys are having sibling issues, please talk to Susan. Oh, you already said hi. Hi, Susan.
Hello, how is everybody? Looking forward.
Yeah.
Please engage.
Yeah. Please, guys, engage with us. Today is Friday. We know you're probably out there, having a good time. But whether you engage in the live show or in the recorded, guys, just engage. That's what's important. Remember to put a thumbs up on our videos. And, just encourage us. Just support us. Support our show. So today we're talking about sibling rivalry. Susan, do you have anything to say early on about sibling rivalry? Are you aware about it? Or is this strange to you? Are you one of the lucky few who never experiences it?
I think the only sibling families where you may not find it is where there's an only child or or something like that. But it's quite a common phenomenon, something that you find in families, and it has a lot of reasons and causes for it. Some of them are unresolved childhood issues. The other one is differing values and lifestyles. That could be religion or politics or even parenting styles. So things like politics in Kenya, and I'm sure in many countries around the world, politics is a hot potato. I mean, the last elections, families voted differently, and I think most of them agreed to disagree on who the best candidate was. And so, guys came out of after voting, and when they saw who won and stuff like that, I think there was a bit of trouble in some families. So in some families, again, it's not a problem at all. I've seen um, the family in the US. I remember during the COVID season, there was a family. I think they were talking about it, and I think one brother is a Republican and the other one is a Democrat. But they're happy with that, and they have their debates and their heated debates, and the family they're used to it. So it's something they managed to handle well. And then the
Mm-hmm.
other one is differing personalities. Some of us are gregarious, some of us are noisy, some of us don't like a lot of noise, some of
Mm-hmm.
us don't like to share our opinions, we don't like to share our things, we're quiet, and we're all different. Any parent who's listening and has more than one child will for sure agree with me that your two children are not the same. Each of them are quite different in personality. And then the other one is competition over parental attention. Sadly, I think parents are to blame to some extent for some of this, where they are not able to treat their children equally, and so that you find them
Yeah.
perhaps favoring one child over the other, and it can cause a lot of trouble. The
Mm-hmm.
competition over parental attention usually happens according to the order of birth, because I check to see whether the order of birth of children affects can has any influence on sibling rivalry. Apparently, the middle children are the attention seekers, but they're also the
Mm-hmm.
mediators. They're used to negotiating because they're sandwiched in between the older and the younger. So the children born in between are usually mediators, and they know how to negotiate, but they compete for their parents' attention. Uh, yeah, and so there's that, and then of course there's jealousy. I think that's
Oh
again
yeah.
something that is has something to do with somebody's personality, and also something that could be triggered by perhaps one parent sort of choosing to give one child, say for example, when the children are young, giving one child nice things and the other one not so nice things, or
Mm-hmm.
giving one child something and not giving the other anything at all. uh, when you have your grades, you come in, but the parents are more interested in this one child's results, and not bothered at all about the other one. And then there's also power struggles. So they want to, in the family, so for leadership among the children, and
Mm-hmm.
that can cause a lot of problems. The other one is disagreements over family inheritance, and that's something Queen Mo has mentioned. She talked about it. That is a very, very hot topic, and I think it's all over the world, where siblings can really be very polarized over stuff like that. Um, in Kenya, we have a whole high court division that deals with succession matters. Um, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and even when a will has been drawn, there's still conflict sometimes, and can be really heated. Some parents have decided to be quite wise. They've tried to draw wills. They've also tried in their lifetimes to show their children, this is yours and this is not yours. But you have to wait for me to rest, and then you can take it. So then we have differing life choices, which maybe may be very triggering for some of your siblings against the life choices that somebody has made. For instance, maybe some addictive behaviors, maybe things like alcoholism or taking drugs and stuff like that. So of course you might argue, at what point does that become a choice or an illness, that sort of thing. But some of the decisions siblings can make can really be very, very can cause a lot of tension in the family. um, the other one is perceptions of
I guess polygamy
differential.
is one of the things as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Life
that's
choices.
that's mm-hmm, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have the perceptions of differential treatment by parents. It may not be real, but it could be a perceived one, and that would
Mm-hmm.
still cause trouble. Yeah, stressful life events. There could be changes in the family, divorce. I actually, some parents, I've come across a few cases where the children have been divided, and
Mm-hmm.
the result has not been good, because
Mm-hmm.
one parent will go with some children and the other one goes with the other children, depending on the parent. Some children thrive better than others, and yet they're children from the same parents.
Mm-hmm.
And that can easily cause a lot of, when they meet, it can cause a lot of rivalry and be very, very triggering. I've actually seen cases like that, and the courts have. I think in earlier times they were separating the children, but I think in more recent decisions they've tended not to do that. They've tried to keep the
Mm-hmm.
children together as much as possible. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
when there's a matrimonial dispute. The other one is lack of communication. So they're not able to discuss issues, you know, or to express themselves well, and as a result of that, a bigger conflicts can result, if not immediately, soon thereafter. And then the other one is competition and comparison. You have career successes, life choices, family situations. Maybe one family, the has a thriving family, and the other one is maybe a single parent, and the other one is a divorcee or separated from the spouse, and that sort of thing. And the parents tend to treat maybe one child better than other, and it can cause a lot of conflict. So parents, of course, have a role to play in this, and we'll talk about that at some stage. Yeah, so definitely, there's a very sort of complex issue. In fact, when I was doing my research, they said there's not enough research on it.
Mm-hmm.
On this, there's not enough research on it to really explain things like whether the order of birth has in any way, what the degree of the order of birth, the influence of the degree of order of birth has on sibling relationships, and it might be triggering as to why two siblings may fight. So you might find the um, the firstborn is fighting with the third born or something like that, or if there are two children, the first and second born are not you know
Mm-hmm.
coping really well. The other thing, of course, is that like in many families or some families, you find that the age gap between the firstborn child and the youngest child could be very big, you know can be very big, say over 10 years, something like that. And how do you treat those children? Are they both firstborns? And if you have a firstborn daughter, and then you have a son, you know, is they're both firstborns in a sense, because uh, they're both, that the firstborn is the firstborn daughter, and first in line of birth, and then the secondborn could be a male child, but he's also the firstborn male child, stuff like that. So, and again, for depending on your culture, the gender of the child really, has also an influencing factor on a lot of things. Some cultures, they tend to, um, take better care of their male children than their female children. The girls are sort of left to figure things out, and the boy is given more sort of preferential treatment. That has been a trend for many years. I don't know to what extent it is still a problem, but at least at the time when we were being raised, Queen Mo and I were being raised, definitely you could see in some families the male children were getting slightly different treatment from the female children. Um, yeah, and it's a battle, especially like with the millennials and the Gen Zs. They want none of that. You have to treat both the male children and female children the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so
Interesting.
to the to the parents, some of the tips to really reduce sibling rivalry is: one, to encourage your children to work out their problems on their own. So you keep off from the strife, and you encourage them uh, to to sort it out. The other one is to teach healthy ways of disagreeing. I don't know how many people have been taught how to disagree in a healthy way, and I'll talk about some
Does
of
the
the tips
parent
on that.
themselves know how to do it themselves?
Exactly.
Do they?
Yeah,
Hmm.
I
Have
don't
they
think
learned
so.
it? Mm.
Yeah, and
A lot of
I
the
found
times,
that
no.
there are actually some guiding ways of how to do it. So the principle is healthy ways to disagree. And this is for actually not just as between siblings, but even between a spouse, a friend, and workmate, even with your boss or something. So it's focus on open communication. So you have to express your viewpoint respectfully, actively listen to the other person's perspective, avoid personal attacks, set boundaries, seek compromise. And if you are really, really irritated, you need to take a step back and cool down. So the priority is understanding and collaboration over conflict escalation. So I don't know if we were just to talk about the famous altercation that we all saw the world over was not altercation, but a disagreement was in the Oval Office between Trump, Vance, and Zelensky, and how that conversation just completely just went. You remember?
Hmm.
Yeah. So they
I
had
don't think I
different
watched it. I
viewpoints.
think I missed it.
Oh, maybe we'll talk about it on Wednesday. Anyway, that's just an example. I'm sure some of the viewers who are going to watch have watched uh, that uh, that discussion. Actually, it wasn't a discussion. At some point, it became a shouting match. So yeah, and then personal comments were made, which were quite which were quite disturbing. It was really bullying. So some of the key strategies for in when you're talking about healthy ways to disagree is use I statements instead of blaming. Explain how their actions have made you feel by saying, I feel this, I feel that. So you don't blame them and say, you did this. We rather say, I feel. Then the other one is active listening. So that means that you pay attention and try to understand what is being said so that you don't, you are waiting for somebody to really explain what they're saying so that you can try to understand. So you're paying attention. No eye rolling, hands crossed, looking out of the window, or the really childish thing of putting your because you're
Eye
some of them,
rolling, putting your head out
yeah,
the window. In
yeah,
Africa, we do this. Ah,
I know.
in Kikuyu, we
Don't waste
say,
my time.
Digivia, Digivia, leave me alone. Me, I know all the
I
Kikuyu
know.
terms. Ah,
Yeah.
mm,
You know
yeah.
that there's so many ways to show you're not listening. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just waiting for
Other
you to
times you
finish
go,
what you're saying. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, those noises and the twisting of
Yeah.
the mouth. You know,
Mm. Listen to him. Mm.
yeah. You know. So you should listen in a polite way. So you're really interested to hear what the other person's point of view is. And then the other one is focus on the issue, not the person. So address the specific disagreement and not personal characteristics. So for instance, if it's about uh, what are the type of things that can really irritate siblings? Um, coming You're supposed to have a family meeting or something like that, and this person is perpetually late, and when they come they disrupt the whole meeting and stuff like that, and the whole meeting goes off and you can't even come to a conclusion because of
Yeah.
whatever this
In
person
other
is doing. So
circumstances, the sibling doesn't show up at all. You've planned
and then
it, you've cooked, you've invited people. The person doesn't show up deliberately. Yeah.
and it's a pattern of behavior,
Sabotage, to sabotage,
yeah.
sabotaging. Mm-hmm.
So that at that point you'd say perhaps, uh, you know we invited you to come, and I invited you to come, and I feel that it's important for you to attend these type of functions and to be on time, because it shows that you're respectful of the other guests who have come. You know, you're respectful of, to explain it that way, rather than
I
say
thought you're
you.
supposed to use I, not you.
Yeah, I said
You should
I,
attend. You should
yeah,
attend these functions because it shows you are
no, no,
respectful.
it would be nice. I felt that it's important for you to to
Oh,
come,
okay.
because when you don't come, you know, the information that you have to share is, there's a gap in the information, or you are a valued member of the family, and it's important for you to be present. And when you don't come, I feel that you've not respected even the other people in the room and stuff like that.
Hmm.
You come up with whatever it is that's making you upsetting you about their behavior, but you don't talk about them, but you talk about the issue is they did not come for perhaps a family
Hmm.
gathering, and
Yeah.
the expectation is that they should be there, so you find a way
Hmm.
to express that. So and then the other one is set
Okay.
boundaries, so you have to clearly communicate what behavior is acceptable and what is unacceptable to you. So, for instance, um, you know, if you have an issue with people coming when they're drunk for the meeting, you have to try to express that in a polite way, because there are some
How do you
siblings who
express it while they're drunk or later? Will they remember?
no, not you. Of course, I'm just that's just an example,
Yeah.
or some extreme behavior, or they, whatever it is, you set the boundaries. Say, um, I like keeping time. I feel when you don't come on time that I feel disrespected when you don't come on time.
Hmm. Hmm.
That sort of
Hmm.
thing.
Or when they arrive and they
Because
start quarreling with everybody, fighting
yeah,
everyone,
yeah,
fighting
there's
from
some people like
yeah, there's some
from the
people.
door,
Yeah.
from the
Hmm.
entrance, they've already shouted
Hmm. You
10
can hear
people.
them very loudly in the kitchen, outside. If you're out with them, maybe at somewhere that you're all seated together at a restaurant, they're yelling at the waiters, they're yelling at people, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, he's not or she's
Embarrassing,
not one of
yeah.
us." Embarrassing.
Mm.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you have
yeah,
to talk to them later and say, I feel when
yeah.
we go out together that, you don't respect other people, and doesn't, I feel disrespected also, because you have
Hmm.
done something. And that our children
And
are
if that person who's
watching.
telling you that is younger, as the older
Yeah,
one, you go, you deal
yeah.
with it
Now
or
that's the,
forget it.
yeah,
You see, that's the
well, that's
problem.
the,
That's the
yeah,
problem. Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
setting
Or if they're
boundaries is
younger,
very
they'll tell
important.
you, if they're younger, they'll
Hmm.
tell you, listen, you're not the boss of me, okay? You know, take your bossiness
And
out of
the
here.
and the generational thing, the communication about the generational thing about how you communicate across the generations,
Yeah.
because like in the African families, there could be quite a big age gap between the firstborn and the lastborn. It's possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And
Yeah,
then
the
we
first
have
one can even be a parent. It's true.
yeah,
And
they're quite
sometimes the
there's
younger
some
ones cannot communicate with the older ones. They don't even know where to start. When they actually have meetings, they're just quiet in the background. Even when they're old, they just keep quiet and they let the older ones, continue having their thing. The younger ones, they've
yeah,
always been left out. It's really sad. Yeah. Communication. Well, yeah, it all boils down to communication, doesn't it? Yeah.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
seek compromise, seek the win-win. So try to understand the underlying factors or the important things to both sides, and
Hmm.
then you acknowledge that and seek the win-win. So you try to compromise. It's not necessarily that one person has won and the other one has not, because I think when it comes to family issues, it's really a mediation that needs to take place in terms of um, so that it's not something that will keep repeating itself. So when you value the underlying factors, when you are understanding where the other person is coming from, then you come up with a win-win, so that you have something, both you have something to compromise on, and again something to take away from that conversation. The other one is take a break when you lose it, when you're feeling like you're going to lose it because you've tried to explain your point and the other person is very objectionable or won't listen to you or won't is not listening attentively, you know. And then respectful language, not avoid calling the other one an idiot or a lunatic. We've had the American politician, the American president calling the Democrats lunatics. I think in the speech he did in the Congress, he also called them some people lunatics, and I think some people were
But
very
he's also being
offended
called a
by the
lunatic
language.
himself by them. They exchange words. Hmm.
Yes, and then
Hmm.
yeah, so respectful language between siblings, and especially, and then the other one is acknowledge their feelings on the situation and then be open to changing your mind. So actually, when you're open to changing your mind about things, that's when you can get the win-win because you're listening and you're saying, okay, you've raised a valid point. You know,
Hmm.
for instance, when the reason why I come late is whenever I walk in, you look at me, you look at what I'm wearing or something like that, or something there's something that you do that's triggering to the other person. So it sort of perpetuates that bad behavior. So then, what to avoid? Yelling and shouting, uh, guilt tripping and manipulation, comparing to others. Don't bring others up to prove your point. I think that's one of the most difficult things to do when you're having a, a, a disagreement is not to give examples of perhaps other people have been impacted by that negative behavior. So what they're saying is you avoid that. You just talk about your response to that negative behavior and allow the others who are affected to speak on their own behalf. And then you have don't hold grudges. Try to resolve conflicts as soon as possible and move forward. And it's true. I think the longer you hold on to a grudge, the more difficult it is to, to address it. And
Hmm.
sometimes the grudge has been held for so long, you've even forgotten why you have a grudge against that person. So it's really important. And it's even for those who are listeners who are Christians, we know as Christians is we're told in the Bible that we should not allow the sun to go down on our anger. So actually, as a principle, it's really good to resolve your issues as quickly as possible. It's not always possible because you're talking about that dynamics between two people or more people on different sides of a disagreement that is
Hmm.
quite deeply felt by by all sides. So it can
Hmm.
take a
Hmm.
while. So it's all that the speed at which an issue is resolved depends actually on many factors. You know, it could be an instant thing that has perhaps irritated somebody. The one thing I know about the sibling rivalry is that it goes back to childhood most of the time. It's something that has been accumulating through over a period of time, a continued and persistent behavior that has made you perhaps the parties realize there's an issue we're not able to get on for whatever reason it is, so and that issue has not been dealt with when it could have been dealt with by the parents earlier on. And the tips on how to disagree in a healthy manner has not also been talked about. I as you know as children, when we were growing up, if you think about it, we were never really taught how to address conflict in a healthy manner or in any manner at all. Depending on the home in which you were raised, some were told really not to have any conflict at all without
Exactly. In
bringing.
fact, like
Yeah.
in our home, if
Mhm.
you're caught fighting, all of you are beaten up. Everyone gets traumatized. Yeah. You're not supposed to fight. You're not supposed to, which is so unrealistic, you know? Yeah. You all get a thrashing, all of you. Every one of you. Who started it? Who started it? Stop. Nobody even knows what happened, but all of you have been punished. And it's very bad because it causes estrangement, between the children and the parent when they're young. And then it's only
Yeah.
later in life you get to understand. But usually when your child is developing, their brain doesn't understand a lot of things. I think adults don't really understand that children are children. Children are un, underdeveloped adults. Even the smartest ones of them, they're underdeveloped. Yeah, they're parts of their brains that don't exist. So you can't try to put in, understanding into a child. Anyway, I'm waiting for Susan to finish, then I can bring up my points. Go on, Susan. Go on. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So those are some of the topic. Those are some of the things that I came across. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that I came across, and then I came across this thing called um, adult sibling hatred syndrome. Apparently, adult sibling hatred syndrome is actually a medical term and is recognized. And it's defined as where adult siblings experience intense, persistent negative feelings towards each other, often stemming from unresolved childhood conflicts, perceived parental favoritism, deep seated competition, leading to significant strain estrangement. And what some key points is that it's rooted in childhood, so it comes from a long way. Possible causes: parental favoritism. Again, you can see the fault of the parent, the culpability of the parent, or the influence of the parents, or the omission or commission of the parents, in terms of they didn't do something or they did something which was could amount to parental favoritism. uh, Competition and comparison. Parents, really, we need to watch how we treat our children, because you can't compare two children, especially on the grades. I mean, African families, we know that one sibling could be really good at mathematics and the other one is not. One sibling could be very good at something else and the other one is not. And some parents are so careless in their speech, and so they tend to ignore the one who's not good in the subject they think they should be good in, and then focus on the other one. And then, so the other one is personality clashes. Definitely, like I said earlier, you can, the likelihood, if you're two people, you have different personalities. It's about learning how to, really engage well with that person. Of course, there's some personalities that are more difficult to deal with. Some of the issues could even be mental health issues, where you're dealing with mental health disorders, which makes somebody's behavior sort of very, very, because they've been they have got mental health disorders. It's not so easy to deal with that person. Then the past trauma, that could also be triggers in that. So, what are the signs of this condition of what we call adult sibling hatred syndrome? Good to know this, because sometimes you may be feeling something and you're not sure what it is. And so avoid contact with that sibling. You don't want anything to do with that sibling. Secondly, is whenever you have a conversation, you argue and there's hostility. The third one is negative comments comes from that sibling. Yeah, they say bad things about you behind your back, but they want you to know that they've said those bad things. So they create, like, they sort of isolate you by the sort of negative information they're giving other people about you.
So
Uh,
toxic.
and then you have
Mhm. Guys,
sabotaging.
comment in
Uh,
the section. I'll stop Susan. If you make some comments, I'll stop her. Just go ahead. Make some comments. Tell us
yeah,
your experiences with sibling rivalry. Hmm.
yeah, we want to hear that. So the
Yeah.
other one is sabotaging your sibling's success, and there's so many
Hmm.
things and things that people
Oh
do
yeah.
about that. Uh,
Hmm.
they can sabotage. They hide your books. They can, cut some things out of your book. If you're in school still, they can just, be the ones who are not supporting you in your career path or your career growth. Um, and then the other one's you feel an intense anger, resentment when thinking about that sibling. So those are the signs that have been identified of this particular condition. And the solution is seek professional help to develop healthy coping mechanisms. The other one is identify the patterns, recognize the behavior that triggers that lead to the conflict between you and that sibling. So you notice, you recognize them, and you avoid getting drawn into the conflict. Usually the sibling who's really toxic to you, the one who's you know caused you to have that conflict with them, they enjoy antagonizing you. So that's why you find that perhaps the person will try
Ah, yeah.
to avoid anything to do with them. So they enjoy
Yeah.
antagonizing you. The other one is,
Mm-hmm.
of course, set the boundaries, establish clear limits on communication and non-communication. So, for instance, an interaction. So, instance, if that person has a tendency to speak abusively whenever you speak with them, you say, I'm not going to. I feel disrespected when you speak in this way. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing. Some, I mean, depending on who you are, offensive language can really, really be very offensive. You don't want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
Offensive language is even not the way to communicate. There's some people who, and so for instance, they say, "Oh, you're stupid," or "You're this," or "You're that," or "Your idea is stupid." Whenever you speak, you come up with stupid ideas. You have nothing to say. That sort of thing. That type of communication, you would have to sort of tell that person, "Look, uh, I feel that you're
Yeah.
not respecting
Fear
me. I
fear
have a
has
view
something
to
to
share."
say. Yeah, fear has
Yeah,
something to say. She's saying, true. What does she say this? Yeah. The majority of parents have post trauma. So I asked her to explain. She says, African parents are seriously stuck in their ways. And Grace says, is it Africans alone? There's just that chat going on there. And Fia explains, like the way they discipline, it's extreme, either with words or actions. Yeah. And they think it's
yeah,
right. They think it's right. And for Grace, I don't think so. It's not Africans alone. It's not. But I mean, she's just explaining for herself as an African, because Fia is African. And she thinks that African parents are stuck in their ways. It's true. A lot of parents, they parent the way their great grandparents and great grandparents parented. And many of them are not aware of what their children are going through today and not ready to change, or to read up. They don't do a lot of reading. Self-help books, the ones that we all read, some of us, some of our parents. Susan, are you done? Because I just want to have a few points I'd like to also share.
yeah. And let me
Yeah.
just finish what I was saying.
Okay,
So
sure.
we were
Yeah.
talking about the solutions to how to
Mm-hmm.
deal with these people who have this syndrome, adult sibling hatred syndrome. And so
Yeah.
the first
And
one is seek professional
wait,
help.
Grace says, agreed, they only give what they have or had. True. Yeah. My
Yes,
father used to say
that's
you can
true.
only give what you had, but I don't really think so, because you can train yourself. Some parents have trained themselves out of it. You imagine, like, for example, the parents who, when they grew up, they believed that girls, they grew up in an era where they believed that girls should not go to school. But our mothers, many of them encouraged their daughters to go to school and go to university. That's a learned behavior. They decided that they're going to push the daughters not to get married early, but to go and pursue education. So, but like you say, yeah, but most of them, yes, most of them, I agree with you, Grace, they give what people can only give what they have. And that's because they haven't invested in themselves. Okay, Susan, I'll give you like 2 more minutes, then I can come in and say a few things.
Yeah. So I was just talking about the solution. So the first is
Yeah,
seek
yeah.
professional help. The second
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah, seek
identify those
professional help.
patterns,
Mm-hmm.
recognize behavior and triggers that leads to the conflict, and so you know to avoid it, so you avoid that area. Then set boundaries, establish clear limits in communication and interaction, things that you don't find acceptable, that person should know. Communicate constructively, that is, communicate in such a way that is not there's a purpose, a positive intention behind the communication. And the other one is focus on self care. prioritize your own emotional well-being and avoid uh, getting pulled into negative cycles. And I think that is so, so, so important, because the minute you recognize this a pattern of behavior, and you kept, whenever you visit a certain space, a family gathering, and the other sibling is there, and you end up going home completely drained or something like that, you need to be able to recognize what is happening. You prioritize your emotional well-being and avoid getting pulled into negative cycles. Yeah.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you very much for that. Self care. That's something that a lot of us kind of like ignore. Self care. Putting your, especially people who are empaths, they can get down trodden on by their brothers and sisters anytime. What about those brothers and sisters? If you're a diasporan and you sent your sister or your brother money to help you build your house, and then they eat your money, what do you call that? That is complete sabotage, like what Susan was saying earlier, you know? And therefore, you need to draw boundaries with your siblings. Even if they say, oh, why are you hiring somebody, a project manager, why are you hiring people to look after your property when I'm here? You think I can't do it myself? I'm your sister, your brother. Entitlement. Anyway, lovely to see you guys here, Grace and Fia. Lovely to hear you. Keep on chatting. Let's talk. This is not a lecture series. This is just setting the ground. Susan was setting the ground, which is nice. And I'm just going to pick up on some of the things she said. Like for example, she said sabotaging sibling success. That happens a lot. Like for example, I know of in certain cases, a specific sibling actually took all this is in terms of succession inheritance. She actually tricked her mother. She tricked her mother because her mother had dementia. She tricked her mother into signing a document that gave her all the property and denied it to the rest of the siblings. Yeah, all the property that was left behind. And she took it, and she's shameless. This is somebody who has brothers and sisters in need. And she took all the money, and it was a lot, hundreds of millions. Took it all to herself. Tricked, I don't know who in countries where there is corruption, it's very easy to use the law, that to misuse the law that way. And unfortunately, once the person has the money, that's it. It's almost impossible, to get that person. So you see that that person doesn't care that the siblings are suffering, doesn't care. And yet the parent, the parent actually had property and things. And so this is the thing that, one has to be very careful that trusting your sibling, it has to have its limits, because you don't actually know. Unfortunately, what happens is that my understanding is that this is from me now, my own assessment, apart from what's out there, is that when you're growing up, you develop a personality and you assume that your sibling still retains the same personality they had when you were growing up. Then you grow up and you don't change much yourself, or maybe you don't think you change much. And then you come back to relate with your sibling, kind of like, let's continue from where we left off. Do you remember when you used to cycle bicycles together, do stuff together, do fun things together? Let's continue from where we left off. But this sibling has actually taken up new belief systems, even religious belief systems, and also cultural belief systems about where you are placed. For example, if you're a woman and he's a man, then he may, if he's in Africa, down in the south, they may decide, like let's say, university also really influences people's perceptions and beliefs. You might find that this person actually believes that women should not have a voice, and then they may be influenced by members of the family, extended family, who might decide, that this, your sisters or whatever, they should not have this and they should not have that. And you yourself have already, been indoctrinated by society away from the way you grew up. Or, for example, it could also be the opposite way, though. But then when we're talking about rivalry, so this can create rivalry because of mismatched expectations of how your sibling is behaving. Yeah, and let me read people's comments first before I continue. Fia says, for us living abroad, it's an eye opener when we sit down, listen, and don't judge our children. This stops children from being afraid and seeking help outside. That's true. Stop and listen. Children are not just to be seen and not heard. Exactly. When you're living abroad, you have to stop and listen to your kids. Kristen Decay. Hi, Kristen. Welcome. Oh, Kristen. Ha, that's you there. When people show you who they are, believe them. Forgive mistakes. Don't forgive malice. Wow, that's a new one, Kristen. I didn't know you're so smart like that. But it's true. Forgive mistakes. Don't forgive malice. It's true. Because when somebody shows you who they are, believe them. Because, it takes a lot. When your sibling shows you who they are later in life and you knew them in another way, and then they're trying to show you a new sibling, you're like, you're in disbelief for a long time. It can take a while. But yeah, you should not forgive malice. You should remember it. You should remember it. Let's see. Grace says, Mo, mm, where there's humanity, there's corruption. It just depends on the visibility of the vice. Some more than others. Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. Where there's humanity, there's corruption. But you see, again, there's corruption. For example, when you look into, for example, the judiciary and the legal area, there's a culture of corruption and then there's incidences of corruption. The question is, which is it? And then there's culture of corruption in certain types of situations and incidences of corruption in different settings. So let me explain this. So, for example, there's a culture of corruption perhaps when it comes to land transactions. But then there's incidences of corruption when it comes to there's incidences of corruption, for example, when it comes to dealing with maybe internationals, visitors into the country. They may apply the law differently, selectively compared to, or people who have people. There's a culture of corruption against maybe the poor, and incidences of corruption. What I'm trying to say is that it depends on the situation. The way I look at the judiciary, I don't know about Susan, but she'll explain that later. But what I'm saying is, yeah, there's no place that is perfect. But the fact is that corruption, what it does is that it enables sibling rivalry to just accelerate and exceed. And let me just share some. Thanks very much, guys, for your comments. Continue commenting. I'd love to see the chat over there, and you can communicate between yourselves as well. Now we're talking about how childhood and sibling conflicts, sibling rivalry, reappear in adult relationships as well. So apparently there's this research that has been done, okay, that talks about the fact that ignored, let's see, siblings who are ignored in childhood, who feel ignored in childhood, emerge as scarred adults, and they call it, and adults may use sibling transference unconsciously, treating others as if they were a sibling. So, in other words, you go to your office and you treat your office mate as your sibling, brother, sister. Be careful when people are calling you brother and sister and they've never met you before. My brother, my sister. What does that actually mean? Sometimes for me, I do get a little bit uncomfortable when people call me my brother, my sister, especially in a situation where I don't really know, or my child or my daughter, when in a situation where I don't really know them well. Yeah, I really don't understand what the expectation is in some cases. Yeah, so there's some research that has been done by this lady called Karen Gale Lewis. She is a sibling therapist for like 50 years. Yeah. And she was basically trying to address what she calls lack of information. She calls it a blind spot in psychological understanding. Yeah, let me not get too technical here, but basically, she released therapy. She released a groundbreaking sibling therapy that explores how siblings shape one another's personalities and lives. So, can you imagine your sibling, your sister or your brother, can make you be a certain type of person? They can actually shape you. They can influence you to be one way or another. You know, a lot of the problems in adulthood are traced to unresolved issues with siblings, with your sister, with your brother. Yeah. So what they say is, and it's true, especially I know that even in polygamous households, for example, you'll find that the children of one mother may feel, antagonistic towards, or should I say, they may feel one way towards the siblings of another mother, who they may think received more time, affection, money, support from the man or from the father, for example. So, for example, the children of the elder mother might feel a certain way towards the children of the younger mother. You know, I know about that in polygamy, that even when they grow up, they transfer those same relationships, those same feelings to other relationships, to other siblings. And they try to create new families. They try to create new brothers and sisters with their friends, real brothers and sisters. And I see that kind of struggle. I've seen it actually, and it's not just with polygamous people, but people who have been injured in their homes usually try to look for a sister or a brother or a mother, even, or a father from outside. Yeah. So this lady Lewis was saying that parents expect their children to have sibling relationships similar to their own. Now, this is interesting. Parents who have had a strong positive sibling bond, that is, the parents themselves, if the parents themselves have strong bonds, have grown up having strong bonds, when they have their children, they believe that their children will also enjoy the same strong bonds, the same dynamics. And then the opposite is true. The parents who experience a lot of conflicts with their siblings, like let's say your mother, your aunties, their uncles, they don't get along, they may also anticipate the fear that their children will experience the same challenges with each other. And actually, there's a transference going on. They transfer those expectations. And you hear about that a lot because you'll find that some parents will be upset that you're talking to their sibling, like you're talking to their auntie. Why are you talking to your auntie? We don't talk. You know what she said about me. And so you as the child are confused because this is your aunt. You don't have the same experience with your mother or father, with their sister or brother. So you want to get close to your aunt, but you can't because your mother is maybe not getting along with her sister. Yeah. So what happens is that those same parents, they can also, those people who grew up with those parents who had difficult relationships with their own siblings, sometimes what they do is that they drive a wedge, they drive division between their children, and their children and their sisters and brothers, their children. And how do they do that? They do that by labeling, promoting roles that polarize siblings. So, for example, one sibling might be given a lot of responsibility. The other sibling is told, you go and read. You know, you're told, you go and cook as a daughter, maybe, and the son is told, you go and read for your exams. That's one example. Another way that they do it is by pitting, antagonizing children against one another, basically. Yeah. So going to one child and seeking advice, guidance. Yeah. Maybe you talk to maybe the oldest daughter or the youngest or the boy. You have an idea. Maybe you want to buy a piece of land and you call your son, who might be the last born, to sit down and chat and talk about, oh, by the way, I'm thinking of buying this land. What do you think about it? And the sister, who is older, is walking around or even sitting there, not consulted, yeah, by the parent. Yeah, that could be also another problem. Another issue is, for example, you can gift, like Susan has mentioned earlier, you can gift one child one thing. Like, for example, I know that in some families, in the past especially, or where there's limited resources, the boy child might actually get preference over the girl child to pursue further education abroad. And that can cause, what we say, trauma, and make the children not like each other. Talking about the children, what is that called? Adult sibling hatred syndrome. It can cause that, because the children, you can antagonize children right into their adulthood and beyond, because some people never heal. They never heal from those kinds of things. Yeah. And so what also happens is that those siblings, they can recreate the conflicts of the parents. Yeah. Communication styles and things like that. So all of that conflict, is transferred. And that's actually called transference. Yeah. So let me see what your comments might be, because I know I've spoken a lot. I'm sorry. Um, Grace says, in a family of 5+ members and all are over 45, with this, our Kenyan lives and commitments, where would one get time to attend a therapy session together? Which makes me ask, what then is therapy? That's a good question. Very good question, Grace. I hope somebody answered it in the comments. Fia says, I feel that after the loss of one parent or both parents, things break down. Fia, I would agree with you on that one. And I also realized there's somebody who told me once that when a parent dies is when you realize who, especially if it's a kind of parent who used to keep people together, you'll find out who it is that was actually keeping the family together. What you assume to be a family that is together, when the person who actually was gluing that family together passes on, you realize actually we are very discordant in this family. We don't get along naturally. We don't. There's one person in the family that keeps people together. um and yeah, fear, so yeah, there. And Grace is saying, a counselor mediating an issue, or that might take several years by the time the counselor acquaints themselves with family dynamics. Jesus will have returned. I'll allow Susan to answer that one at some point because I know she's a mediator. But let me read all your comments first. And Grace continues, Fear, things break down, but if you're willing, you can get together. Grace, you just said, when will you get together? And now you're saying you can get together. Okay, let's see how you answer that one. Kristen says most conflict between siblings stems from the parents, e.g., favoritism, unequal expectation, and punishments. I completely agree with Kristen on this one. Yes, Kristen. The way parents speak about the siblings to them, that is true. You've heard about parents who create this golden child syndrome. Yeah, that this one perfect child, this is, and you hear a parent actually say, me, I don't even have any children. A parent with 6 kids will say, me, I don't have children. The only children I have is this one and this one. The others are not their children. Yeah. And they say it and they say it and they say it. Hmm? Fia says, my late mom kept us together. How lovely, Fia. How lovely. I can also say my late dad kept us together. My late dad was the glue between in our family. And now, hey, I'm trying to look for the glue before it dries up. Hmm? To keep the family together. I'm trying to, be the one to hold the family together. But I think I don't really think so, because I don't really think I have that capacity. I think it gets to a point where everybody has to decide whether they want to be a family or not. Don't you think? What do you think about that? Susan, no. Grace is asking about mediation. I mean, it will take until
Yeah,
Jesus will come back before you even go for mediation and conflict mediation. Thanks,
yeah,
guys. Love these comments. Let me first read
yeah.
Kristen's last one. Definitely stereotypical gender roles can lead to conflict between siblings of the opposite gender. Might I guess, Christine, that you might be either millennial or Gen Z? One of the two, like Susan was saying here.
Yeah, millennials and Gen Zs will say their part, their piece, and they're very. I like that because you know what they're thinking. You know, yeah. About mediation, I think if something's really important to you, you'll make time for it. Um, there's also the stigma of
Even
really
if you're
sitting.
over the age of 45.
Yes, yes. If it's really important to you, because it depends on your life's experiences. If you found that this is something that's been troubling you throughout, and maybe you're looking at, I'm going to retire soon. I really want some of these issues to be settled. I want to have a peaceful time after I reach this age. And if it's something that's really bearing heavy in your heart, you will find time to really sit down with your siblings. And in fact, you don't even have to sit with all of them. You just sit with those who are willing to sit. And this is for a family counseling session. mediation is really one of the best things, because really it's the way it is, the mechanism of in mediation, it encourages the parties themselves to come up with a solution. And because they have come up with a solution, it will self-regulate itself. You don't need anybody to really push and say, oh, you've done this, because they've agreed, yes, let's move forward in this way. So mediation, time for therapy, that is, if it's hurting you enough, you will find time for it. There's no doubt. It doesn't matter how old you are. That willingness, really, to resolve those issues. Yeah, I wanted to talk about the types of sibling relationships. I came across
Susan,
five.
before you
They
do
could,
that, I haven't finished mine. I haven't finished my section here. Let me continue, then you come in. Is that all right? Yeah, because I just want to, I'm not like you who can think straight like that. Me, if you interrupt me, that's it. I won't remember what I was saying. Okay, so now we're talking about favoritism, and that is something that Kristen is bringing up a lot here. Things to do, differences in how parents treat kids. It's a risk factor for sibling estrangement. That means siblings going their own way and not wanting to be engaged with each other. Yeah. So basically, the research by this other person called Carl Pilamer, a sociologist and professor of human development, Cornell, suggested that between two-thirds and three-quarters of mothers have a favorite child, and that their children are keenly aware of a parent partiality. That is really true, by the way, guys. And if, for example, your parent ends up getting dementia, you will see exactly who that favorite child is, because all the filters are gone at that point. And at that point, actually, it becomes a relief, because if it happens to be you, it might be a relief or it might be a burden. Because if it happens to be you who is the favorite, you will be expected to be there 24/7. If it is not you, then you are free to go, okay? Because you are not even remembered. Okay, guys. So here we go. So children become aware of the preferences of parents at a very early age. Young children, particularly those who are close in age and in direct competition with each other for parental attention, are extremely sensitive to favoritism. That's really true, by the way. When there's a gap, a very small gap, yeah, children are aware, and not only are they aware, but they're even aware of injustice by the parent on their sibling. Are you aware about that? Children themselves can come to the aid of their own sibling, because if the parent is busy, controlling one sibling or down demeaning one, the other one might say, hey, stop talking like that to my sister. This is my sister, or this is my brother. Yeah. So you'll see that kind of thing. So those are so there, but then they also say that there are some drawbacks to being the most favored. Okay. So as much as siblings want to be the parent's favorite, part of a study that was conducted discovered that no one wins when favoritism is in play, because the youngest of because what happens is that you find that you might end up being resented because of being the favorite. Yeah, because of being the favorite of the parent, you could end up getting resented. Resentment, you might actually draw resentment from your other siblings, and they might isolate you eventually when you grow up. So it doesn't help to actually favor any child. That child, you might actually be digging that poor child's grave in terms of relationships, future relationships with their siblings, because they feel traumatized by the fact that you have, that they, that you got preferred status with your parent. Yeah. Again, when it comes to research, again, because I really love this research, is that parents should be mindful, like what Susan was saying, about how favoritism can hurt all family relationships. Try not to play favorites with your kids, no matter how much you feel like you can. Like, for example, I'm a parent of my own biological child is one, and my husband has two kids. So I'm a step parent and I'm also a parent. So raising my son alone, that was easy. He was my favorite because he was the only one, right? But now I have these two, and I have to be always careful whenever, because he's all grown up and gone. Now, when I'm raising my son, my husband's kids, when I'm there, I tend to find that I'm very careful. I watch and I see, because the two kids are very close in age, just like what they're saying here. They tend to be very competitive. And I always have to remember to balance the scales. So if I give one a compliment, I have to give the other one a compliment too. Okay. So I have to always be neutralizing, because I don't want any of the children to think that I have a favorite child, because I don't actually. I really don't. But at the same time, the idea is, you have to, the perception, like Susan was saying, is there. Many children perceive these things. You have to be so careful to be balanced in terms of giving the same amount of time. If you buy gifts, if you buy new shoes, if you buy, even if you have one of the children who spoils the shoes more than the other one, you just have to buy the other child something to compensate. If you keep on buying this one child who's careless a lot of new things, and then the other one who's careful, you're not buying them things, then it looks imbalanced. You have to always be mindful about how we, treat children. We have to be really, really mindful, because otherwise, you can hurt the relationship, and then in the end, you can end up with these damaging patterns in the children's lives, which can go beyond their lives to even their work lives and elsewhere. Let me see what you guys are saying first. Uh, yes, yes, yes. It is important. If it's important to you, um, this is Grace. Yes, yes, yes. If it's important to you, it's a coalition of the willing. Yeah, she's talking about what Susan was referring to, in terms of going for counseling, that if it's important to you, you'll make time for it. And she says, yes, yes, yes. Kristen says, even in the Bible, Isaac is the cause of the conflict between Joseph and his brothers. Really? I need to go back and reread that, because he showed blatant favoritism, yet they were all his sons, and look what happened. Actually, that is true. The poor child was isolated, I remember, in his multicolored coat. But he became king eventually, didn't he? Joseph became king at some point, or
No, no,
something like that.
no.
Or what did
The
he become
conflict.
eventually? Hmm.
No, let me just correct that. Yeah,
Okay,
and
correct it, correct it, correct it.
that's a very important observation, actually. Um, Jacob was the father of Joseph and his brothers. So
Oh,
Jacob,
oh, 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 apologies.
yeah,
Okay, okay.
so Jacob favored Joseph,
Yeah.
and so there was enmity,
I'm thinking
a
of
sibling
Benjamin. Yeah,
rivalry.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what
Hmm.
they ended up doing is they dumped him and they sold him off to some slave traders, and eventually he ended up in Egypt. But yeah,
Okay.
that point is very true, because he
Isn't
was
that
obviously
transference then? Isn't that transference of the
he, wa-
parents'
yeah, Joseph
favoritism?
was yeah, Joseph and Benjamin were definitely the favorite children of Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
they were, the younger ones, and there were some older siblings, and they really did not get on well with them, because of
Yeah.
the father's outright favoritism,
Yeah.
which is, yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very important
I think
observation.
most of
Yeah,
us grew up in houses where we knew one of the children was favored more than all the others. And actually,
yeah,
some parents are even not even smart enough. They would say, you know what? I've been waiting for a boy or for a girl, and this is my
yeah,
favorite child. Oh my God, very, very not
yeah.
smart. Okay, so Grace is saying, um, Mo, where isn't it tiring walking on eggshells? Aye, exhausting, I must say. In fact, nowadays I don't walk on eggshells. I actually create my own bombs. You try to mess me up, I'll come up with my own bombs. I'm tired. Like, you're always, if you're an empath, you're always trying not to hurt people's feelings. But what usually happens is that you might find that one of your siblings or both of them are planning something behind your back all the time. So they're always planning. There's always scheming going on in the background. This is the worst thing. So if you walk on eggshells, you might actually end up with egg on your face if you're not careful. You always have to be alert to the fact that there could be something sinister going on in the background, which is not something that one would anticipate or want. But you see, unfortunately, if, like Susan says, it's very important for people to go for mediation, for counseling, for things like that, because I tell you, sibling rivalry can be bad. can be really, really bad. Yeah. And Grace is also saying when you have all the kids with you, that's emotionally exhausting. Totally. And that's the reason why a lot of people actually decide to dump their siblings. They decide they don't want anything to do with them. And they don't even the parents, they don't want to see the siblings or the parents. And when they go to work, they don't get close with anybody at work. I've noticed that. Either they get very close with somebody and make them their brother or sister, or they decide it's work and home. They don't want any relationships at the office or at work, any close relationships because they've been burnt by their own sisters and brothers. Yeah.
I just
So
want to
that
add
was that was us sharing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just want to add something on the favoritism
Yeah.
angle.
Sure,
And
Susan.
there's this like maybe let's call it a bit of a complex relationship, because you could have a special needs sibling, and because of that special needs sibling, a lot of the parental attention is on that child. So, for instance, if you have one of your siblings in the autistic spectrum and needs certain support from the parent, what ends up happening is that the other children learn how to compensate, because perhaps the parents' attention is mostly on the autistic child, because they need more attention, more care, and stuff like that, specialized care and that type of support. So I think in that type of circumstance, it's very important for parents to be aware of the fact that they need to make time, special time, for the other children, because they might be impacted also uh, by the fact that there's a lot of focus on the special needs child, and they become very sort of self self-contained and quiet, and they don't speak much about the way they feel. They become quite reserved because nobody's really asking them questions, because the focus is and they learn also to just focus on the special needs child. So their childhood is somehow different, um, because they haven't perhaps got much attention. So this, I'm bringing it up because that child, you can't really put them in the category of the favorite child. It's like a necessity sort of response to a special needs child. And but it's important, it's very important for the parents to being aware of that, to make sure they're taking care and they're finding time. They're very intentional about how much time they're spending with the other children. Otherwise, you end up, depending on the personality of this child, who doesn't speak much, the other child, now not the special need one. You don't know what type of damage is occurring, and that sort of thing. And because they've felt mostly ignored, then you end up, it impacts the way they relate to others, and even perhaps even relate to that special needs child. So that is I just wanted to differentiate that a little bit, and also to highlight about the different types of sibling relationships. And I'm just going to say them, and maybe people can consider and think, oh, is this my category with my siblings, or anybody who's listening. The first one is the best friends. So you have a deep bond with that sibling. First of all, let me just say, um, my research showed that the strongest relationship bonds are between sisters. Yeah. And then in comparison, when you're comparing the different sibling types. So between sisters can have a very strong bond. Then so it's stronger than the bond you can have between brothers, and stronger than the bond you can have between brothers and a sister. So when you have the mixed family and when you have the single sex family, just the sisters, or even sisters in whatever context it is, and so I think that quite matches our personalities as women. Women form, I'm not saying men can't form deep bonds, but but somehow they're more like lone creatures, but women are very sort of community and more social. They're more social and that sort of thing. So sisters have the strongest bonds, then followed by brothers, then compared to brothers, two brothers, or brothers and brother and sister. So so the 5 types of sibling relationships are the best friends, so that's a deep bond. Then you have the rivals. And when you hear some of these negative things, you just know that the parents also have something to do with it because of the way they raise their children. So the rivals, competition and conflict, that competition and conflict. And then you have this third type, which is the caretaker and the protected. So it's like Queen Mo gave the example where you find one sibling, even defending their other sibling to the parents because they can see perhaps that this child has not been treated in the right way. So this one will speak up and say, oh, they didn't do that. They didn't spill the milk. They didn't do this. Don't blame them. It was actually done by somebody else, or it was accidental or something like that. So you have the caretaker and protected. And then you have the estranged siblings. Uh, and then you have the indifferent siblings. So the indifferent, I think indifference is one of the worst relationships because it's like you don't care, literally. An estranged sibling, at least it shows that there's some level of caring, but you realize it's not so easy for you to be in the same space together. That the indifferent is somebody who's really has no real emotions towards the other sibling. Then looking at the context of our families, we have the nuclear family where you're all biological, your biological siblings. Then you have the blended family where maybe um, your you your parents have married each other and they've come with you, and the other parent has come with you know their children. So you have what we call half siblings. No, step. Or you have a situation where there's been you're among the older children, and then there's another marriage, subsequent marriage, and so you have half siblings. The half siblings you share the blood. The step you don't.
Yeah, but you can
So
have that in a blended family. You can have both because you
yeah,
see,
you can have
yeah, you can have both.
yeah.
Mm.
So you can have the yeah.
Step
You can have
and
the
step, and also what do you call them? The blended family. The step and what?
there's step
And
and
real
there's half.
and half. Yes,
Yeah,
and half.
half
Hmm.
half
Yeah.
is when you share a common parent
Yes. Yeah.
biologically,
Yeah.
and step is where you don't
Yeah. Yeah.
share any.
Obviously. Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
your
Yeah.
your your yeah you're just your
Hmm.
parents married each other, but you have no blood relationship with one another. So in that type of
In the
relationship,
US, they talk about it all the time. Blended family. I was introduced to that when I was in uni back in the US long ago in the 90s, where people will start talking about having a blended family. I love the US because people open up and they tell you, even at work, unsolicited. But I like it because they share. That's very important. Hmm.
and then of course we have, when we're talking about half siblings, we have the polygamous families, like the Muslims, they can have multiple wives. You can have in our customs, you can have polygamous families, um, and that sort of thing. So you have that type of relationship with the siblings. I remember talking to one person who told me that his relationship with his siblings was very good, even though they were not from the same. Their father was the same, but their mothers were different. It was just
Hmm.
the way they were raised. They were raised like one family, all of them, and that was the structure of their home. But then
Hmm.
again, you have the other ones where they are not raised as one family, but different families belonging to with a common patriarch. And so
Hmm.
sometimes you find that rivalry occurring, which can be very, very toxic, and needs serious mediation. But one thing about mediation I didn't mention is there has to be a willingness on all the parties to resolve the conflict. So that's something that is very, very essential. So were you? I was just going to say that. I don't know whether you want to say something else.
No, I think at this point, except just to read Kristen's, she was saying, "Sorry, I meant Jacob, not Isaac." It's okay, no problem, Kristen. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
All I was gonna say is, yeah, all I was gonna say is, when it comes to sibling rivalry, we should understand that sometimes we carry our sibling ghosts to wherever we go. We expect to see people who behave like one of your siblings wherever you go. Whether you're in church, in a group somewhere, you're looking for your sister or your brother there because you have some unresolved problem or issue with them, or because maybe even I would say, perhaps maybe because maybe you're like, if you have these kinds of relationships where you're looking for protector, you're looking for someone who will protect you in a group. You're looking for someone like a big brother or someone who see you like a big sister and call you that. Yeah. And so I think we have to be careful. Oh, excuse me. That's a gecko. If there's one thing I don't like, it's geckos. Apologies for that, guys. I jumped. I was like, oh my God, what's that? Yeah, it's a gecko. Oh, so annoying. So anyway, yeah. So sometimes, like I was saying, like you have to be careful. Talking about protector, yeah, I would have needed protection from a gecko right now, and I'd be looking for a big brother to go look for it and find it and take it out. Yeah. So we have to know that a lot of the conflicts come from that unequal treatment in families, and we should be careful not to carry those along with us everywhere. The part of the healing is to, one of the best things, for example, with my experience of going to the US and that I also bring here, is that thing called individualism. Yeah. Learning how to find who you are, because unfortunately, like in our many African families, it's almost like they blend you to the point where you don't even know who you are eventually. Sometimes in some families, like the way we grew up obeying. The child who was the most obedient, the child who was the most easy to get along with, the one who listened to the parents, usually got favored by the parents. And the parents were, drawn to them, and they did better and they adjusted better in life. But the child who was a natural rebel, who had their own way of seeing the world and wanted to explore, they sometimes had a difficult time adjusting and adapting in life. So, what's important is to recognize that you as an individual are unique, created differently, and it's your job to find your path individually. And that's one thing I learned from being in the US, that they would always ask, what do you want? What do you think? What do you? So it's like, okay, so that's what everybody else thinks. But what about you? What about you, Maureen? What about you? What do you think? And it forces you to come up with your own philosophy about life. This is how you're philosophically going to approach your issues, your problems. This is who you are. Learning who you are is very, very important. Differentiate yourself from the rest of the siblings in the family. Recognize that this is what we have in common, that blood, like Susan was talking, bloodline, but I'm also different in this way. This is how, okay, I've taken this and this from my parents, but also I believe this and I think this and I want to do things this way. I think it's important to guard your turf. Like Susan was talking about boundaries, creating positive boundaries, but allowing people to also have their boundaries and not to cross them. So I think determining who you are, it's unfortunate when you find adults who never really found themselves. They just go with the crowd. They just blend anyway. They don't have any msimamo. They have no, you can't say that this is what this person stands for. So a good example is Martha Karoa. Martha Karoa, to me, is a good example of somebody who knows what she stands for. She doesn't get swayed easily into anything. She stands her ground, and that's kind of like what I'm talking about. Like, find yourself, know who you are, what your principles are, what your values are, stick by them, stand by them, defend them, as long as they're not hurting anyone else. Okay, so let me read. Oh, there's some more comments, are there? Emotional exhausting, yeah. Gecko alert. I tell you the truth, that gecko. And it's funny because I think I called somebody a gecko today because I think they called me a monkey or something. I don't remember what happened, but I was very upset. But I love geckos because they get rid of mosquitoes. Okay, guys. Yeah, gecko alert, guys. Where is my protector? Any one of you, my siblings in here? I'm looking for a sibling, a new one. Is that Grace? Grace, are you going to be my sibling, my protector?
Yeah. So the psychological effects of
But we should be, Susan, just an alert. Here's an alert. We should be winding up in the next 10 minutes, guys. Okay?
yeah.
Okay.
In fact, I just wanted to say the psychological effects of sibling rivalry, estrangement, indifference, all those things. We talked about the indifferent, estranged, the rival, you know, that sort of thing. All those negative bonds, relationships between your siblings. It's depression, the mental health situations, of course, depression, eating disorders. It can even be eating disorders, anxiety, because you're so stressed all the time. And of course, you know, anxiety manifests in so many ways. Um, and then substance abuse, because you formed what we call negative coping mechanisms on how to deal with the stress of that relationship. Um, yeah, and so some of um, the proposals, or rather the solutions to how to cope with adult siblings fighting, and this is as you as a sibling who's in that type of situation, is don't take it personally. So you sort of have to distance yourself from the conflict. This is for your own survival. This is for your own peace of mind. And then find support elsewhere. If you have just the one sibling and they're the ones who's toxic toward you, then you need to find support elsewhere. You need to form that bond with, you know, and you can form a bond. I remember watching a movie and I thought this was just an amazing story, because this guy, I think he didn't have a family. So he decided he was going to create his own family. And he had been left a house by his, you know, he was the, you know, the last member of his family. He'd been left a house by his parents. And so he decided to make his own family. So he made his friends and they all lived in that house as a family. So he picked his family. I mean, he chose his family members. So I thought that was quite an interesting story. I've forgotten what that movie is called. Um, so anyway, find support elsewhere. Find that friend who's like a sibling to you. And then don't perpetuate sibling rivalry. So it's got to end. It's something that you should be intentional about ending. So if you find that it's not something that you can do when you're in proximity with that person, but you will not perpetuate it. You will not be the one who's going to continue to to um to 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 grow that rivalry. Then the other one is accept the reality of the situation, because you can't change it. You can do your best to mend bridges, but if you find that it's not working, you just accept the situation. In fact, the Bible says, make every effort to live at peace with people. But the fact it says make every effort, it sort of acknowledges that there are some people that it might be very difficult for you to actually live at peace with. But you know, it doesn't mean that you don't stop trying. It just means that you don't allow it to take over your entire life and you're not able to function. Because if you're suffering from mental health issues like depression and anxiety and eating disorders, then you'll not be able to function. The quality of your life will be damaged. Um, then the other point is invest in your own family. So if you have your own family, you invest in it, you know, and be mindful of those negative practices, the ones that you know, and be alert so that you try to do everything you can to sort of teach our teach your children how to manage or how to have disagreements in a healthy way, like the points that I gave, so that they do disagree. By the way, it's very good to have healthy disagreements, as long as it's not something that ends up being a toxic thing. It's actually really good, because it shows that you are thinking, you are an individual, and you're thinking because you don't like this, you don't like, and you're able to articulate yourself. In fact, I think as parents we feel happier because when our children are able to stand up for themselves, because you feel my child will be able to stand up for themselves, because you can't always be with your children. So then the other one is get additional support if needed, and that's the mediation, that is the therapy, the counseling. They really help, um, to help you to rationalize, to understand, to process information. That sounding board, they help you to learn positive coping mechanisms, even to view the situation differently. Whichever counseling you're getting, if it's biblical, if it's secular, it should be something that is useful and helpful to you, because at the end of the day, you matter, and your life, you just have that one life. So the quality of your life, to some degree, um, it depends on the choices that you make, if you're able to, because we're assuming here that the mental health situation are not got out of hand. But of course, if you go for treatment, you'll be able to be treated, because none of these issues are untreatable. Depression is treatable, eating disorders are treatable, anxiety is treatable. You can be, you can go for rehabilitation and get off the substance abuse. And actually, for each of these, especially the substance abuse, it's a decision an individual makes. And we've seen many people actually recovering and living quality lives, even after they've gone really, they've suffered such mental strain as a result of maybe toxic relationships. So we need to protect our minds, we need to protect our lives. If you have a family, focus on your family and nurture good habits that will ensure that this is not something that will be perpetuated to the next generation. It will stop with you, so that you're able to, in the best way, teach your children how to live as a family, and teach your children the principles that they're going to pass on to their children. Um, and I think that's one of the greatest gifts as a parent you can give to your children. It's one of the greatest gifts. Like Queen Mo talked about how siblings we impact each other, and we sort of help to form our siblings, because the ideas, we influence the way they behave. And we should each desire to be that role model, that will be somebody that will be looked up to by your children, not because you're their mom, but because they admire those qualities in you, that there's something that they want to do. And also for your siblings, especially with that, the African families, we're talking about those huge age gaps, because you can have one who's, they're in completely different generations, and not just the next generation, the next and the next generation, because of the age gap. So you have those ones looking up to you. And the structure again in the African families is the firstborn children and the older children are looked up to by the younger children, just because that's the culture in the, I think, among the Africans. It could be even among the Asians, that you look up to your elder siblings. So I just want to encourage us all that there's a way out, there's a solution, and it's not an easy journey to take. This is a very, very tough journey, but it's one that can be taken, and that one you can achieve something positive at the end of the day. We want our children to be peacemakers. We want our children to live healthy lives. We want them to be able to cope with adversity, but and know when to seek help.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. As an older sibling myself, those words that you say were pounded in my head since I was a baby. You're the older one. You take responsibility for all the things that your little brother or sister are doing wrong. So eventually what happens is that, yes, you do, you do have a place to play. You do have a role to play as an older child, but also parents should be very careful not to make older children lose the opportunity to be kids as well. So grow up too fast, deny them of their childhood. A lot of We should talk about that, the firstborn syndrome. It's there. The firstborn syndrome is a very difficult thing. The first child usually carries so much weight. Sometimes they are called the parent's spouse or the parent's co-parent. So what happens is a lot of the older children are denied their childhood, and they grow up very traumatized. And sometimes their growth is, you find that the second and the third children and fourth and other children do better than the firstborn, because the firstborn has been saddled with so much responsibility since they were very young. So they were traumatized early in life. There are many, many firstborns out there who are victims of this kind of treatment by their parents, where they were forced to grow up very fast and was subjected to a lot of punishment, a lot more punishment, torture, all kinds of things, just because they are the first child. And it's very unfortunate because I think these are parents who, I wouldn't say any one of us like Susan or I would be those kinds of parents at all, but we hope that we're not any or any of you guys. But we've heard stories of people who burden, you see little children carrying their sisters and brothers on their backs. And you know that that's a firstborn little girl, a little girl who won't go to school, or the boy will go and herd animals so that their little sisters and brothers can go to school. There's a lot of sacrifices of firstborn children. So what we need to do, like I said before, or like we're trying to say here, is like it's about investment in self and remembering that you are a valued member of the family, and that you have your space and your place to play, and you do need to set boundaries, like Susan is saying. If it means that you have to eventually cut off a relationship, well, that is something that can be decided, but it's not an easy decision to actually cut off a brother or a sister, because they say blood is thicker than water. It will draw you back, one way or the other. You hear your brother or your sister is in trouble or they need blood. Do you think that you're not going to provide? You will. It's very few people who will sit back and allow their brother or their sister to suffer knowingly, knowing that they are suffering, even if no matter what the situation is. So, but it's good anyway. It's good to hear this. I think mediation is good. What we've heard today is that it has to be important to you. It must be something that you yourself want to resolve. And Kristen is saying at some point you have to choose what type of relationship you want to have with your sibling, and parents may be the roots. Oh, she talked about that earlier. Yes, you have to decide. And Grace is saying firstborns end up co-parenting. That is true. My daughter, a millennial, straightened me out about that. Not very politely, but it sunk. Well. It's actually true. And, even only children, unfortunately, because I have an only child, like when my son was growing up, he was almost like my brother at some point. There's even a picture of us in the house where people say, "Is this your brother?" Because, the way that he was brought up in the home, because he was brought up in the home with my brothers and sisters, he kind of grew up like us. So I was also growing up the same time he's growing up. So I kind of sometimes confuse some the times that he even used to think I was his big sister, and that my mother was our mother, not his grandmother, my mother and his. So it's really crazy. So you have to be creating that parenting. It's a lifelong learning process, and that's one thing I can tell kids, our children, is that they need to understand one day when they become parents, they'll understand that no child comes with a book, and most children are born to very young parents, and most of us don't have experience with babies and children. So you learn as you go, and you make mistakes as you go, but at least it's good now that we have the information. Apart from therapy, one can also read books. Self-help books are very good. You can read books, you can read stories, you can watch YouTube, you can try to just build yourself up as much as possible, and learn, because we're always learning. Isn't never There's no perfect parent and there's no perfect child, but we can just say that we're all on a journey. Yeah, we're all on a journey. So, okay, siblings, I hope there'll be peace for all siblings, goodwill to all siblings this weekend. May you find your sibling, make peace, and go for counseling, go for therapy, or talk, or at least, try to rekindle that relationship with your sibling as much as possible. And at the same time, remember to look after for yourself. Yeah. Okay, Susan, thank you. Grace, Kristen, Fia, all of you guys have been so active in today's session. Really appreciate that. Thank you, Grace, for coming on board. Now we have people who are mainstays here. They're with us. Just missed Louis. Where was he? Uh, and a few other people who are usually here with us. Alternative. Remember, his name is something Alternatives. We hope to probably see you in the recorded version, and anybody else. Welcome again. On Sunday, we're going to be talking mental health, and this time we actually might be talking about something to do with nutrition. So if you have any questions on nutrition, let us know. Bye. Thank you, Fia. Thank you, Grace. Live long, sisters. Live long, Kristen, and everybody else. Bye bye. To-dos. Good night. Bye bye.